Now, I'm joined in the studio by Jill Hewitt, CEO, and Matt Redman, the Vice Chairman, from the National Association of Agricultural Contractors. The NAAC is the only trade association to represent the interests of land-based contractors and fight their corner in Westminster and across the industry to ensure recognition of the sector. Lots of contentious, thoughtful and mind-stretching points we're going to make, but the NAAC recognises that contractors have become an integral and vital part of the UK agricultural scene, with many farmers struggling to operate without them. Contractors are land managers, advisors and protectors of the countryside, and they're providers of skilled labour and suppliers of high capital cost machinery, so much of which we can see around us today, and professional services. So Jill, Matt, a very good afternoon. Welcome to LAMMA. What a really quite exciting show, isn't it?
It is, yes.
We're absolutely packed here. We've got 35,000 people and lots of people are going to be interested in the NAAC. So Jill, coming to you first, tell us a little bit about NAAC.
So as you said, we're a national trade association here to represent ag contractors. Three main things, I suppose, that we do for members. The first, probably the most important, is the representation. So for an example, yesterday I was in London talking to DEFRA about the importance of contractors and the fact that we really mustn't forget contractors when new policy is being made, or grant funding and other important things like that contractors need. And then we provide information and advice to members and promote the sector in a positive light, hopefully.
Well, that's absolutely right. And Matt, tell us a little bit more about how you work with and support contractors.
Right, as Jill said, putting a contractor's view across within government and things like that is definitely the big one, really. And you've got the likes of the NFU and that doing it for farmers. Well, contractors, the NAAC is what does it for contractors. And it's also a really good community to sort of bring contractors together. So it's a membership organisation. We have social events and things as well where we can share ideas, and quite often you get contractors from different ends of the country doing the same sort of job, and we're all under the same sort of pressures with the same challenges, and it's nice to have that go-to sort of thing to be able to share those ideas and get through those troubles.
Sharing best practice over a glass of wine or a pint is always a really good idea. So customers, when they're looking to take on board a contractor, what are the key requirements that they should check for, Matt?
I think to start with, they want to know that the job's going to be done correctly. Is it going to be done to the high standard? The hardest thing about letting somebody else do a job is ensuring that they're going to do it to the standard that you do it to for yourself, and making sure that the contractor that's coming in is going to do that for you, make sure they're doing it safely, they're fully insured, they're going to turn up when they say they are, and that the price is right as well. It's important that the price is right for both parties. That's probably the biggest factor when you're looking at a contract. So what are you going to charge?
After all, this is a business, isn't it?
Absolutely, but both sides of the fence, and everyone's got to make their profit.
But I imagine, Jill, that training is an important part of what people should look for in a contractor.
Yeah, absolutely, and making sure that whatever job it is that the contractor's been brought in to do, they're properly trained, and their staff are as well to do whatever that operation is, particularly things like spraying, where they need to be on the ROSO and have all their PA qualifications.
No, sure. Quite a lot of the contracting world is massively time pressured, both self-driven because they can move on to the next job, but also with crops that need pulling in before the weather turns. Is retention an issue within the contracting world?
In terms of staff?
Yeah.
I think with any business it's a bit business dependent, but staff is a big issue for the NAAC and for our members, and finding the right staff that can be good at the job and are competent is a difficult operation, but at the same time it can perhaps, I think farmers are also struggling to get the right staff, and so contractors are increasingly brought in almost as their members of staff.
I think the workforce as a whole is struggling, not just post-COVID. I think this is a very real thing, and Brexit probably has caused other complications there, and I've no doubt that the hybrid contractor is an area which Matt, you probably want to talk about as well. But people who farm have maybe bought some really expensive plant and machinery that they want to get best utilisation out. And quite a few of your members, what I would call a hybrid contractor who have their own ground as well.
Yeah, I'd probably go 50-50. I think you've got the specialist contractors that really deal in their specialist area of the industry, like seed processing or mill and mix sort of feed processing and that. And then you go to sort of the general ag sort of side of things, where even then they could be specialists. They might specialise in muck spreading or crop spraying or something. But then, like you say, you've got the hybrid, the general ag that do a bit of everything. But going back to your staff point, I think that it's an industry-wide challenge that staff is there, and part of that reason is that the perception of what is the agricultural industry and what sort of job does it entail, and it's an incredibly high-tech industry now, and contracting is certainly no different from that. If anything, it's even higher tech, because you've got, look around the halls today and there's not a single machine really that doesn't have some kind of computer system on it to help it be more efficient, and robotics and autonomous tractors and that are coming along, and that's only going to hopefully aid the staffing issue, but it doesn't mean that it's going to replace them. It means that instead of the sitting on the seat and being a steering wheel attendant, it's going to mean more high-tech sort of controlling and managing different aspects. The
contractor becomes a system operator rather than a plant operator, and the training and being current and competent with, as you said yourself, some of these machines are absolutely extraordinarily complex. Is that, are you seeing, Jill, that technology is an area where perhaps you've got a really strong position over maybe a farmer who's not used to equipment, in that your members are using their kit and equipment all the time and are absolute experts?
And I think contractors tend to be very much innovators, and they're looking for what's coming next, so they need to be up to speed with a lot of this new kit. And I think we're looking for, as Matt says, perhaps looking for a slightly different operator in the future, who's not just a driver, but they can manage all this technology.
I don't think they've got any choice.
That's the future, but it's also now. That is there. The machinery in this hall and this show is what is being used on site, on farm now, and it's the labour challenges are there because of, exactly like you said, the timeliness, the peaks and the troughs of the workload. If you're a arable contractor or a silage contractor or something, you've got that weather window and you've got that peak season where suddenly you've got a lot of hours to do and then a quieter period, if you like. And as contractors, we've got to manage that with our staff and accept that we've got to enable people to have that work-life balance. But we are looking at it from a NAAC point of view, or the industry as a whole, that is changing, and more machinery utilisation. People are going to contractors because one machine that's £500,000 or something can go to 25 farms and be utilised. That technology is then passed down the system, whereas smaller farms they can't
with a skilled operator.
It's crystal clear that this is where the industry is going, and if you're not a massive agri-business, you cannot have a barn full of machinery like this sitting around doing nothing. So the contractor has to be in a really good position, I think, going forward. One of the things I wanted to touch on is assuring contracting and the assured contractor, because being current and competent and the expert is clearly the vital ground for you guys. So tell me a little bit about the assured contractor scheme.
Yeah, so we've got what's called an assured land-based contractor scheme, which we've got for agricultural operations and feed and potato fogging, and also mobile seed. So it's not been widely taken up in the Gen Ag type sector, but certainly our mobile feed sector, it's very much part of Red Tractor, and it shows traceability, and it shows that feed produced on farm by a mobile that can be equivalent to buying in feed. It's produced professionally as a service, and that's what we're trying to do with the standard.
And why the less good take up from the sort of Gen Ag side?
Well, I think there's no need to do it. So some members do it because they want to prove their professionalism, and what we'd promote is that it's a really good way of health checking your business. So even if you don't go as far as doing the audit, have a look on our website and look at the standards and check that your business could comply, because most of what's in there are legal requirements, and it's about proving it. So I would suggest every contractor should go and have a look and make sure they've got those requirements in place.
Well, I think that's really sound advice.
It's a great checklist for the whole business, not just, it doesn't just cover the tractor and the machine and the operator that goes out to farm, it's back into the yard, it covers electrics are pat tested, working at height, yes, farm safety and everything like that. So it is a complete package, if you like, and it's been reviewed in the last couple of years, and we're sort of hopeful that we can start to sort of push it out and increase the uptake. But in the short term, look at the checklist, go through it and say, actually, X, Y, Z's covered, but maybe that one's not quite as well as it should be.
It's interesting because we all know that farming as an industry has a really not great health and safety record. Contracting outperforms pure farmers, and for me that's a USP for contracting, that you're going to employ people who are using that machinery every single day and really understand everything about it. And it is a Daily Mail moment for the industry as a whole, because a lot of people's only sort of touch point with farming is seeing contractors driving too fast through the village or what have you, and that must be a really important thing for you as well.
It is, and I think often the perception with this massive kit is they appear to be driving faster than they perhaps are. And a lot of contractors they're all sign-written vehicles, so they're very aware that they have to be community spirited, if you like, and we talk to a lot of them about the fact that they do take care and talk to their local farmers about where sensitive areas are, I suppose. So as an industry, we don't want to be upsetting the public any more than farmers do.
Of course we don't. I mean, it's interesting that the construction industry have a operator's license for building sites where deliveries are routed in on certain routes, and I wonder if that's an area where we might go to, that actually turn left out the farm rather than right, so you're not going past the school at 3 p.m.
Yeah, and I think people already have some of these things in place, I think, and I think for safety that's a good way to go, and I think in general we need to just as a whole industry, have a rethink on safety and the attitude to safety. But I think you're right that contractors tend to be at the forefront of that, because they're very visible and they're on and off different people's farms all the time.
The more efficient, to be safe, you want to be efficient. So like you were saying about turning left, turning right, you're not going to want to turn right and go past a school at 3 o'clock if you're trying to be efficient, because it's going to slow you down, it's higher risk, it's more dangerous, everyone's aware of that. So work plans are put in place to ensure that vehicles are going where they should be, to minimise the risk of low bridges or schools or built up areas at awkward times of the day. We don't purposely drive a big tractor and a trailer through a residential area at all times of the day on purpose, because we don't want the phone calls to say, oh, you're waking us up or anything.
No, of course not.
And it's mitigating the risk, managing it, using social media to let the local community know that the weather's good at the moment, we're going to try and harvest these fields. We'll try not to do it on a Sunday if we can help it, or we'll try not to go too late. And I think it's all moving very fast, and over the last few years the tools available to increase that community awareness have been developing rapidly, but also the community engagement, and you often find that there's somebody that doesn't quite agree with it, but a lot of people do, and it's nice. It's another way of interacting with the consumer further down the line, not necessarily as a contractor, because obviously the farmer is a consumer, but if you look at that farming system, at the end of it, it's the food on the table at the bottom of the run of everybody involved in the supply chain, really, and they all interlink, and it's important to make sure they're all working together. Farmers they're always in that place, contractor comes and he goes, so they don't want somebody turning up causing them hassle that's going to be there for the rest of the year, and the contractor likewise doesn't want to upset their customer either. Which
plays into another thought, which is how can you help a farmer in their selection of a contractor?
So we've got a find a contractor section on our website, so if people want to look for a member, they can go to that area of the website, which is naac.co.uk, so that's easily accessible. Or if somebody just wants some help, they can ring the office and we will help put them in touch with a member.
And are you finding that that's being used a lot, that find a contractor?
It varies. I think some people will say they've got a job that's paid for their membership for the next 10 years, which is great. And then in other areas, it's very much a word of mouth type. But that's very much where we'd say it's about the professionalism of being a member, so that you've got all that information to stay ahead, so that you're in the right, you're turning up on time, you've got all your machinery well maintained, you're providing all those things that Matt talked about at the beginning as a professional, and that will help keep you in work.
Yeah, no, I understand that. One of the sort of little segments of the contracting world is that quite often the contractor is your neighbouring farmer. You might have one piece of kit and do something for him, and he might do something for you.
Yeah.
How does that? Because that's a slightly different relationship from your classic farmer contractor. I don't know who wants to answer that.
I would answer to start with, and I'll pass to Matt. I would say similar, in fact the same, because if you go onto somebody else's farm, you are effectively contracting. So you need to look at things like insurance and your safety protocols to make sure that when you're working on that, they might be a mate, but if you go and spray off the wrong field, you might not find they want to take you shooting or whatever. So it's, make sure your insurance is in place to do some contracting if you're operating on a neighbour's farm.
So just because you own a piece of machinery doesn't mean that you can be hired out to operate it?
No. There's different levels of insurance for different things, but there should be, before the machinery arrives on farm, regardless of whether you're farmer to farmer or contractor to farmer or whatever, some pre-arranged check sheet, if you like. So it's always good to agree the price before you start. That's probably the main thing. But what is the job? Where is the job? What are the restrictions? Are there any overhead power lines, underground? A risk map of the farm is always a good start. Are there any restrictions on turning left, turning right, schools, whatever, neighbours that perhaps they work nights, try and avoid them or something like that. So make sure that all the possible questions and challenges that could arise are covered off beforehand, so everybody knows where they stand. Mud on the road's a good one. Who's responsible for clearing it up? Who's on site from the farm for the contractor to be able to communicate with as an emergency contact? Who knows that you're there or you've started the work and left the work? Think of a worst case scenario and how you would mitigate that, and then cover it off on a pre-start check sheet, if you like, and that way you know that when the person coming to do the work knows who to contact, they know that they're going to be safe. So that gives you peace of mind that the job's going to be done correctly and you haven't got to worry.
There are other industries which have walked this same path in terms of health and safety and professionalising. So HGV driving and construction, I think, being two sort of fairly obvious ones. And both of those have seen the one or two man or woman business be sort of squeezed out, really, and bigger corporate entities tend to have a better or more professional approach to health and safety. Because one of the nice things for me about contracting is that it is still quite a fragmented and small business where you've got local people who one or two people. Is that something that you feel is inevitable that it will change, or can we still keep that?
I don't think from a safety point of view that's inevitable at all, because a small business can be just as safe as a big one. I think perhaps with construction it's been the customer of those contractors who have enforced all this.
Absolutely, yeah.
Excuse me, whereas in the farming industry it's more about us as an industry taking responsibility for ourselves, rather than there's unlikely to be, unless it comes from the retailer end, somebody telling us we must be safe. As an industry, we need to take, I think, more responsibility for our own safety, because we're killing more people than, I think we're up to about 28 since last April.
Which is 28 too many, as I'm sure we all agree. And I think, for me, the sort of cartoon character of someone working in our industry is that they are on their own and they're unsupervised, and that's when people cut corners, because they're familiar, they're doing the same job they've always done, and they do it in a certain way. To lighten the tone slightly, no, you were going to say that.
And margins are tight. That's the other key thing. Like, it's a very skilled industry where a lot of other industries, they need something done, they'll get a plumber in, they'll get an electrician in, they'll get a mechanic in. Well, to a certain degree, farmers or agricultural contractors, they're very good with their hands, they're very skilled at repairing machinery, putting buildings up. So they'll try to do a job that perhaps sometimes isn't quite right, and that's where we need to sort of draw the line and say, look, we've covered this off, and we've gone through our risk assessments, we've done our plans, we've done our ALBC checklist, if you like. That's out of our remit, let's get somebody in. And it's difficult to do that, everybody appreciates that, but that's the way we've got to be moving. But there's certainly no reason why big business or a small business can't do that. It's not that the way the industry's moving isn't going to push the smaller guys out. It's certainly that there's certainly a place for those, and they can do it equally as well, if not better.
A bit of a light-hearted question, but have you seen a Clarkson's Farm uptick to contracting after Caleb and everything?
I've heard rumours that contracting is more sexy since Caleb's got involved. I don't know whether that's true. I think it's given us more recognition as an industry, because probably pre-Clarkson people didn't even know that contractors existed, or what, they just assumed the farmer did all the work.
I think people who lived in towns definitely didn't.
Yeah.
I think the people who live in the country probably did.
And probably some of our legislators didn't.
Yeah.
So it's broadening that
I think
message.
A wider understanding of what's going on in the field. Why is that tractor going up the road, or why are they working late? I think it all comes together as it's just good promotion to get more people involved. And I think, aside from Clarkson's Farm, but the other thing is Farming Simulator.
Yes.
I mean, what kind of as somebody who drives a tractor and does that thing on a daily basis, I can't get my head around it, but it's big. It's massive now, isn't it? The amount of people involved.
I have been genuinely gobsmacked today that it is such a big. There are 90 million users of Farming Simulator.
That's something we need to harness, because it's a way of showing people the kit, the technology, the job, if you like. Okay, it's not quite the same as sitting in a warm room and doing it like that all the time, but it's reaching a wider number of people than anything the industry could ever do, really.
Yeah, if we're moving to contractors and farmers becoming system operators, as we discussed, actually it's perhaps not as far from a warm room as you know. I thought this morning when I woke up that it was just a game, and it might not be.
From it.
Far from a game.
Very on regular loop in my own house.
Is it? Oh, right.
And actually, I'm always surprised by how much the kids are learning from it. And they've got a bit of an ag background, so that they're a step ahead, if you like. But God, the kit on there, I'd assumed it was some cartoony. Far
Not
from
at
it.
all.
Yeah, far from it.
So tell me, how have you both ended up in the sort of trade body of contracting? Jill, first.
Well, I suppose I grew up on a farm. I've always been involved in farming, and 20-some years ago, when this job came up, I just thought it interested me, and then I've struggled ever to get away, if I'm honest. And I've not tried, because it's a really interesting. I'm regularly surprised by contractors and how innovative they are.
In a good way, I hope.
In a good way, and that the industry is generally a nice industry to work in. And I think if bringing new people in, I have no qualms about saying no. It's a really good, can be fun industry to work in.
Can be fun. Definitely is fun. Is my view. So Matt, how did you get into this?
So I set up contracting on my own. We're sort of looking, how do you set yourself apart from the guy next door, if you like, and prove that what I'm doing is professional. Where do I get the advice to do that? It's easy to go, right, I bought a tractor, let's go, but how do we get that paperwork right for the customers that require it, or how do we know that we're doing everything correctly behind the scenes, if you like? And the NAAC as a membership organisation provides that to members. There's templates and everything available to help you with your risk assessments, cost assessments and all that kind of thing. There's contacts for, is this legal to do this, sort of tow this machine, or how to do this, and there's points of contact for all of that. And then there's the social side of things I want to get to know other contractors. We'll go to the AGM, and
there's sometimes beer as well.
Maybe sit on your hands so you don't get asked to do
twice he's
something.
mentioned the social side of it.
I think that's a really big thing, because
we know you do. Yes.
A good example of it would be a few years into it, we had a trip to Denmark to an agricultural show much like this. There was 20 of us that went. I just took on a contract to do an operation that I hadn't done before. I was tying the paperwork together, trying to figure out how to do it, what kit do I need to do it. And there was a guy from Yorkshire on the same trip who was doing it, we got to chatting over a couple of days, got home, he emailed me all his paperwork to help me do it, and we're not competitors because we're far enough apart.
Chatting over a couple of beers, I think is probably more accurate. Listen,
Everything
thank you
was
so
there to
much
go.
for your time. It's been really nice talking to you. I mean, thanks again to both Jill and Matt for joining me here in the studio for a live Agriconnect TV interview. If you'd like to learn more about the NAAC, you can visit their Contractors Lounge in Hall 19 or go online to naac.co.uk.